This is my presentation on why Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza is not a genocide. First key point is humanitarian aid. UN agencies, independent agencies, and human rights watch groups have stated multiple times that Israel has not let any aid into Gaza, or has not let enough substantial aid enter Gaza. From humanitarian efforts Israel, they have records of every single truck, every single airdrop, and every single boat that has offloaded aid to help to deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza. In total, 2.2 million tons worth of aid. From land crossings, 2.15 million tons. From aerial routes, almost 8,000 tons. And from maritime routes, almost 10,000 tons. Food aid has been 44.3% of the food type. Basic products is at 33%, food parcels at 9.5%, fruit and vegetables at 6.9%, and then everything else at slightly smaller but still manageable amounts of aid that are substantial. Now, from the UN's from another Israeli organization called Kogat, and their recent August 2025 response to IPC's publication, they've stated that over 100,000 trucks of aid have entered Gaza since the start of the war, including food, medical supplies, fuel, shelter, equipment, entered Gaza through the various crossings. Close to 80% of the aid that entered consisted of a wide variety of food. Israel's expanded efforts to facilitate a humanitarian response based on the needs of the ground and continuous humanitarian assessment. Now, starting in January 19th, 2025, so earlier this year, and as part of the hostage release deal, more than 25,200 trucks of food, water, medicine, and shelter equipment have entered Gaza through the crossings. Since the reopening of the crossings on May 19th, following the temporary closure in March by the directive of the political echelon, daily deliveries of food enter international aid organizations and to distribute points. There is no ban on the entrance of aid by the UN, nor a quantitative restriction. Scroll a little bit down, it says, in recent weeks, significant steps have been advanced to expand the volume of aid entering Gaza and to ease the collection process at the crossings by the UN and international organizations. These measures include facilitating the entry of humanitarian aid through a variety of donors, including the UN, states such as Egypt, Jordan, and the UAE, International Aid Organization, the American company distribution sites, the private sector, and airdrops. From another COPACT report, it talks about the IPC's discrepancies and how different reports don't match up for the same time period. For example, much of the data was drawn from hospital settings and children involved in blanket supplementary feeding programs, BSFP, malnutrition prevention programs. This is at odds with IPC guidelines, introduces a profound selection bias, and renders the findings unsuitable of the wider population's nutritional status. Why? Because you're only getting your data from one demographic, which could be a small demographic, but when you primarily interview them, you're getting a larger demographic, even though they're not. Another one is the absence of morality evidence. Famine classification requires the clear evidence of excess deaths if the independent surveys cited in the report as supposed evidence of the approaching famine threshold show the opposite. Mortality rates are nowhere near it. Similarly, the Gaza Ministry of Health figures were not only almost 2 orders of magnitude lower than the IPC protocol threshold, but also flat over time, directly contradicting the IPC's claims of exponential growth. So you have the IPC, which I believe is a United Nations organization, contradicting the Gaza ministry's health by inflating the numbers, therefore making that an unreliable source of data to gather from. From the Gaza Strip, there have been 6,100 coordinations between Hamas and COGAT in order to get food and humanitarian aid into Gaza. In total, since the war began, there has been roughly 6,100 coordinations in total, 61.7% of which were regular coordination and 38.3% were sensitive coordination. Sensitive missions include complex war zone operations and high-ranking delegations. Now, from the approvals, denied, and denied refusals and cancellation lists, 84.8% of aid has been approved. 7.2% of aid has been denied to prevent aid from reaching Hamas, which is something that has been a struggle since the beginning of humanitarian aid efforts, where Hamas will go in, either pose as civilians or just straight up raid supply convoys. And then 8% has been denied for operational reasons. Again, it's a war zone. It's going to happen. Of the approved coordinations, 500, over almost 1,500 have succeeded. Another maybe 50 has partially fulfilled. And then another couple hundred has completely failed. And this is from the approved coordinations with Israel. Now, from the Henry Jackson Society, it discusses that there are incorrect reports. For example, a man on row 7051 of the 30th of April 2024 fatality list was identified as an infant named Mohammed Fahed Zakaria Akafarna. Sorry if I butchered that. This identity number matches in the population registry against a different adult male named Wasim Ashraf Omar Abu El Mazam, age 31. The entire entry, including both the identity number and the name, has disappeared completely from the 31st of August 2024 fatality list. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but it is right there. Sorry if you can't make that out. The next one is there's no possible explanation for reporting a 31-year-old man as a 1-year-old baby other than faulty methodology, either through misidentification of a body, media report, or family referral. In addition, men have been recorded in the fatality list as female when the same individuals appear as male in the Palestinian population registry. In the August 2024 list, 103 names were marked as female who had a male first name, example Muhammad, and these men were recorded as women in the 31st of August fatality list. This is right here for there. Oh, and there's here a few more if you're able to read that at all. Now, from the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Response Situation Report number 42 from OCHA, or the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, where is it? It reset. On 8th of December, at least 3,230 pallets of aid administered by the UN and its partners were offloaded at Gaza's crossings, based on the data retrieved from the UN 2720 mechanism dashboard at 1800 on December 9th. About 69% of these pallets contain food supplies, followed by shelter, which is 23%, water, sanitation, hygiene items, 5%, and health supplies around 3%. At least 128 truckloads were offloaded at Kerem Shalom and 12 at Kisufim. Now, here's the problem with a lot of these verified death tolls. The way that the UN verifies it, because they claim that they cannot get into Gaza, even though their aid is able to get into Gaza. I believe they provide almost 740,000 tons worth of aid since the war began and humanitarian efforts began. But the problem is that they go to websites, and they go to social media, and they go to all these platforms that can't be independently verified by the UN members. So what they do is they take down the names, they take down all of that, names, date of birth, etc. They go down to another website, typically the Gaza Health Ministry, and then they cross-reference that. And then if both names show up with the same data, it's marked as confirmed. But then with the ones that don't match up, they're listed as unidentified casualties.
There's free hot chocolate in the Jefferson room if you want to hang out for a meal.
I'm recording a video.
Okay.
You're good. And the problem that this originates from websites, like what I read from which I read from the Henry Jackson Society organization just a couple of minutes ago, is that these death lists are not always accurate. And one of the things that you're not able to trust is social media posts. Everybody knows you should not trust just social media posts on a whim. It's basically common knowledge because there's no way to actually verify what that post says unless you go down and do it, research it for yourself. So the United Nations goes in and research and verifies it that way. It's not trustworthy. Another thing is that there has been evidence that Israel has had a long history of violence against the Arabs, and that's just not true. Every war since 1948, except for one, which is the Six-Day War, was started by the Arab nations surrounding Israel. The Six-Day War, though, was a preemptive strike by Israel because they had seen Jordanian or Syrian and Egyptian forces building up along the border to start pushing into Israel. So Israel decided to invade first, catching the enemy forces off by surprise and demolishing their militaries in 6 days, hence Six-Day War. Now, there is a claim that this occupation is illegal on Israel's part. But the thing is, though, is that Hamas is a terror organization. Back in 2007, I believe, they overthrew the Democratic government, which I believe was the Futa. Sorry. So they overthrew them, and then they established themselves up as the leaders of Palestine. And then they held an election, and then they won because there was pretty much no one else willing to go against them, especially after they just threw over the government. So this means that they've essentially lied by omission that they are a democratically elected government, when they're not. They're a terror organization that overthrew an actual government and set themselves up as the government. Another issue is that people claim that there's no water. People have no access to water. This is a lie, since in northern Gaza, I believe there's enough water running through from Israeli pump stations and Palestinian pump stations that each person is able to have 13 liters of water per day. This is around a few gallons. And mind you, you only need half a gallon a day to drink. So this means, if my mental math is correct with how many gallons you get from 13 liters, you still have 2.5 gallons of water left over. And mind you, small kids, they don't need a half gallon of water. That half gallon is just an average for most adults and teenagers. So to say that there's not enough water in northern Gaza is a lie, because there's evidence of people being able to get lots of water. And in southern Gaza, it's even more, at almost like 14 or 15 liters of water a day per person. So the UN verified death toll reports can't really be verified because they don't go on the ground, even though they can go on the ground, they just choose not to. Secondly, saying that Israel has purposefully denied aid is not true, because like I said, around 84% of aid has been approved. Any aid that has not been approved has either been because they are afraid of Hamas getting it, which is a valid fear since Hamas is known for doing that, or there's an active military operation in the area and they don't want humanitarian aid workers to die, so they hold off the aid until later. Now, you can't trust either side because either side is biased. So until the United Nations decides, okay, we're just gonna go in by ourselves because we need to go in by ourselves because we claim that this is happening, so we need to go in. Until they start doing that, you can't verify anything. You can't verify the death tolls. Especially considering the fact that Hamas, they wear civilian clothes when they're fighting. So, how many fighters were listed as civilians when they were fighters and they had their guns taken? So, that's my presentation.